I'm Katie Moro. I work at Amadeus Hospitality. I'm actually based in New Orleans in the United States. So I flew to Singapore over the last 30 hours with my husband and 3 children who are enjoying this wonderful city today while I am here with you, which I'm very excited to be. So I will just talk about data. So hopefully you like to listen to all of the interesting trends that we're able to provide to you. I will just go ahead here real quick. So I wanted to kind of set the stage to just talk about what data I will be referring to throughout the presentation. So really at Amadeus, and this really spans outside of just the hospitality division and really all of Amadeus Group, we are focused on helping the customer journey, right? And so I will talk about data and how we're supporting each part of the journey as we go through the presentation. So from the traveler perspective, we'll look at some socio-demographic data and what types of travelers are coming to, and I'll talk about Singapore and Bangkok throughout the presentation today. And then we talk about the inspiration phase, right? So when people are searching and thinking about planning a vacation, they're actually looking into where do they want to go. So they're searching for their journey, for their travel. Then we talk about buying, so actually people have to make bookings, right? So we'll look at that from an airline and a hotel perspective. What are people booking? And then when they're getting on the airplane, right? So you have to think about what are the schedules, what is the capacity of the airline into each individual market. If you think about an island destination, if the planes are full, there's no more hotel demand coming, right? Because there is no more opportunity to get someone there. So you have to think about that from a schedule perspective. And then we'll look at the traffic, who's actually booking on the airplanes themselves. And then the experience, so they get there. What is the length of stay they're staying? What is the hotel occupancy? So you think about those types of data points that kind of really end the journey, and then obviously you'll want to follow up with your traveler after to get them back for repeat business. So without further ado, let's hop right in. So we'll start with Singapore here. So what we're looking at here is the 2 data points I just talked about, the traffic and the capacity. So you can look here and see May 2023 is kind of the dark blue line, with the lighter blue line being May 2024 through April 2025. And then we also have the forecast that we're forecasting to look at from a bookings perspective on the airlines. So Singapore's looking very good, 8.7 year-over-year growth. You can see that if you're looking out into September, from the August to September timeframe in the forecast, you do see a little bit of drop, but it looks like that is a typical drop if you look back the prior year. So it just must be a slower period in the market, and obviously you all know your market much better than I do. So that's the data we're looking at here. So taking it and just looking at some of the insights, where visitors are coming from. So Australians are the top 2 in searches, but only in the top 9 in bookings. So it's interesting from a hotel perspective or a destination perspective. How do you actually get the Australians that are searching quite a bit to convert to bookings, right? And so that may be in a package, right? Through booking.com or through trip.com, you might want to be part of a package to really drive their bookings, right? And how do you get them to go from that search to the booking? Is it a price problem? So you want to start to think about each individual traveler or different markets. What is their behavior? And how do you then generate the demand and the bookings into your hotels? China. And we see this globally. If you joined the State of the Industry webinar I did last week, you really do see this globally. The Chinese traveler is back from a search and a bookings perspective on the airline. So you can really see that coming into Singapore, top #1 search and #4 in bookings coming into Singapore. So going from 15 to 4 from last year. So that's a huge growth and definitely a source market that if you're based in Singapore, you should be paying attention to. And then the next point, you can see that China, Thailand, and Japan are all showing huge year-over-year growth. So definitely travelers you need to be targeting from a hotel perspective to generate business into your property. The US has a steady position in searches and bookings, so 5 and 7, so still a key driver market coming into Singapore. And then South Korea, pay attention to it because it's interesting, I think, as we compare Singapore and Bangkok. Top 9 in searching, but top 2 in bookings. So it's interesting. There's not as much search activity happening from South Korea into Singapore, but people are booking. So I don't know if that's a typical behavior that you see, but definitely seems like an important origin market that you should be targeting because they are booking quite strongly into Singapore. Okay, so then from a lead type perspective. So I'll say this, right? I've done a lot of work at different conferences and things that show kind of what the demand curve is between airline, hotel, and short-term rental data. And they all have very different lead times, but the demand curve is very consistent. So I think as an industry in hotels, we don't pay enough attention to external data sources to help us understand what are going to be our busy times or what are times that we need to generate demand. And so air lead time is a key indicator because if you're starting to see air demand further out, you can quickly identify what are your peaks and valleys and what will eventually turn into hotel demand with a much shorter lead time. So you can see worldwide to Singapore, the majority of travelers are booking between 15 to 180 days. Right, that's a long gap, and we can break that down into smaller numbers. But if you think about from a hotel perspective, most of our bookings are 0 to 14 days. So all of this is happening before. So you should really be looking at this data to understand, again, when are your opportunities to generate demand. And then I think the other key point that we took away from the data was there is actually a big growth in the 1 to 7 day lead time. So if you're in Singapore and you're thinking about lowering rates very close to arrival because you don't see the demand that you thought you were going to see, you may want to think again because airline bookings are up in that 1 to 7 day window. So you might have an opportunity to actually drive more business in that short booking window. So then from an age perspective, so again, this is that socio-demographics, the things I talked about. What is the information about the traveler? So majority of travelers are in the 46 to 65 age group. India leads in the kind of the younger generation, 26 to 35. Unfortunately, I'm not in that generation anymore. And I think it's interesting, right? And why is this important? This is important because this is how you target the traveler, right? I'm not on TikTok, so the TikTok world doesn't mean anything to me. So if I'm the age category traveling into your market, it might not be something that you want to invest as much in. But if the 26 to 35-year-olds or even younger are traveling in, that's probably a key driver for you from a marketing perspective. So you definitely want to look into that. And you can see from Indonesia as well. And then I'll come back to and I'll compare Singapore and Bangkok at the end from a cabin class perspective. But what cabins are being booked on the airlines could be a key indicator of what types of hotels the travelers will stay at. Are they going to stay in more luxury properties or more mid-scale or upscale properties? And so you can see from a source market perspective, India on down, what's happening into Singapore as far as the cabin class people are booking. So again, to note, from South Korea, economy has grown 7%, but business has declined. And from a cabin class perspective. So I want you to remember that when we look at Bangkok in just a minute and we kind of do that comparison. So switching gears to the hotel level information, right, not the airline. So now we're looking at on-the-books occupancy from our database of data. We have about 45,000 hotels that share data into this database. So you can see here, looking at current year as the dark blue line and the previous year as the light blue line, you can see the occupancy percentage into Singapore. So when I look out into the June, July, August perspective, July and August look pretty good from a year-over-year perspective, where September there's a little bit of a dip. And we did see that in the airline bookings as well. So somebody might tell me at the break, is that the typical pattern that we see? But you can definitely see a little bit of a dip coming into Singapore in the month of September. But look at the ADR in the month of September. So is there a mismatch of ADR and occupancy? And again, maybe this is just my lack of knowledge of the market specifically, but the ADR jumps up very high in September, where the occupancy is down a little bit, and the airline forecast is down a little bit. So again, a month you should pay attention to, deep dive into that a little bit. Do you have the right strategy in place? Okay, and then we look at the mix, right? So from a channel perspective. So OTA share has increased from 33 to 35% in 2025. And I know that we talked about, I know Karis talked about it, that yes, we want to drive direct bookings. That's always important. That's what we're all here to do. But if the OTAs are driving more and more business into Singapore, that's a strategy you need to look into. Do you need to open up more availability? Do you need to get involved in those packages and maybe drive more business from an Australian traveler? So those are kind of the things that you can start to think about when you're looking at the channel mix. But the discount segment now represents a little bit more of the business than the prior year. So again, that means lowering rates and more business to the OTAs. With demand up in Singapore, do you need to be doing that? Is that the right strategy? And only you can answer that, but these are the questions that I want to pose to you to kind of think about. So again, this recommendation, kind of what I've been talking about throughout, right? Do you need to start to put bundles together? Is the OTA going to be a huge channel for you? Do you need to shift focus there because that's where the bookings are coming in more and more? Maybe. So it's just something you want to think about from a distribution perspective. Okay. So now Thailand. So let's look at, I just did Bangkok. I'll have a slide at the end. You can scan the QR code. We have more market information that's free. It's just on the website, so you can do that if you want to have more information about your market specifically. But Bangkok, 13% year-over-year growth. I mean, when you look at some of those numbers in I think it's like January, February, over 5 million passengers going into Bangkok in that month. That's truly unbelievable and the highest it's been, at least what we can see here, since May of 2023. So definitely some very strong numbers, and into July and August looks very strong. So very exciting times in Bangkok. Okay, so where are the visitors coming from? So majority are coming domestically from Thailand. It's the #1 search and booked from a source market perspective into Bangkok. South Korea is 8 in searches, but holds the 2nd position in booking. So similar to Singapore, people from South Korea are not searching as much, but booking. So it could be an interesting source market that maybe you're not paying attention to, that you want to look at more marketing campaigns to try to drive that traveler into your hotel. China, Taiwan, Japan, and UK have the biggest growth in bookings. So UK, very interesting and different a little bit than Singapore, where we did see China and Japan as key drivers of business. And then Australia and France show in the top 10 in searches and not bookings. So Jackie, I don't know what's going on with the Australians, but they're searching for these journeys, but they're not actually booking. So we need to, it's not Jackie, no, she's here. So I mean, interesting, right, to see they're looking. And so maybe we need to dig into that a little bit more. Why are they not converting? All right, from a lead time perspective, about 25% of people book within the 60 to 180 days in advance. So again, you have that longer lead time into Bangkok, which is a great indicator of hotel demand, and not as much as Singapore, but still a small increase in that 1 to 7 day booking window. So very last minute trips. I think that is probably the next generation of traveler, last minute, let's just go. And so again, something to pay attention to and might change how you price in the week for the week, understanding the airline demand. Okay, from an age perspective into Bangkok, majority of people in 46 to 65 age category, with China and South Korea leading that. So it is an older South Korean group, it seems like, coming in. So maybe how they book is a little bit different. Maybe we don't see as many searches because of that. India leads in the 36 to 45 category, where we saw before that the Indian traveler was a little bit younger going into Singapore. And inbound travelers from Thailand lead in the younger generation of 26 to 35. Okay, then cabin class information about Bangkok. So you can see that within Thailand, the business class travel has declined quite a bit, where you see a growth in the economy segment, so maybe a little bit more cost conscious from a travel perspective. And then South Korea dropping on the economy side, but growing in the business class cabin. So I'll just go to the next slide so you can kind of see the comparison. So if I look at South Korea, right, as my example, into Singapore, in the economy segment, they've grown by 7%. But into Bangkok, it's declined by 2%. And on the business side, it's declined going into Singapore and grown going into Bangkok. So it's very interesting to understand, and I think it's so market specific, especially in this region. Where are the travelers coming from? Where are they going to? And how are they spending their money? which makes it a little bit more complex as a hotelier to understand who you target, when you target, and what price, right? Because it's definitely not consistent in how people are traveling. So I thought this was very interesting information, and I think could be crucial for hotels, especially if you think about a brand that has ultra luxury all the way down to a mid-scale property. How they target could be very different, even within their umbrella. So again, something to really consider. Okay, hotel information in Bangkok. So it's interesting when I was putting this together because on the airline side, remember, we saw 13% year-over-year growth into Bangkok. But when you look at the hotel information, we are behind last year. And although you might see a little bit of an overlap into the July-August timeframe, it really is behind. So I went into the short-term rental information, which I did not provide here, but I will give to Jackie when she sends this out so you have it, kind of just to bring all the pieces together. The short-term rental business is quite strong in Bangkok. So that is competition for anyone who has hotels in Bangkok, right? So you know that the airline business is up 13%. The hotel is not. But now you have another key piece that's involved that you need to understand. So are you competing with the different OTAs, Airbnb, all of the likes, and do you need to position yourself against that, not just hotels that are right next door? So something to consider, and I thought very interesting, and I think we should be paying attention to it for sure. And then you have the ADR information here. Again, you kind of see a little bit of a spike into the September timeframe, but overall, year to date, you're pretty much looking like last year, except for that January, February, March, where definitely we were lower from an ADR perspective in Bangkok. And then from a channel and hotel segmentation, so the share of direct bookings declined from 43% in 2024 to 41% in 2025, and the OTA has held steady. So I question that. Why did the direct bookings decline? I don't know the answer, right? But something to think about. Do we need to do better from a marketing perspective, driving direct bookings? Because obviously we know with direct bookings we're finding a loyal guest, and we have much more opportunity for repeat business. And then you can see from a segmentation perspective, discount and group grew year over year, while wholesale and retail decreased slightly. So group is always good for me, right? Anytime we can get that group demand, that base business on the books, it helps from a transient and whether it's corporate or leisure strategy. So seeing that group demand is great, but how do you capitalize on that and not lose on the retail side, right? So you want to make sure that if you have that base business, that you have the opportunity to drive higher rated retail business. So again, just a couple of recommendations here. So we talked about China, Taiwan. They're rapidly growing, so definitely something to pay attention to. Make sure that you understand what cabin class are they booking, what age group is coming. The travelers are coming, so making sure that you really understand the details of the traveler to make sure that you can get that traveler to stay at your hotel. And then look at some of those low months, right? So we looked at September as an example. Are there things that you could be doing to try to generate demands for those low demand periods? And maybe looking at packages. We've talked about the OTA growing, so there's some potential opportunity there from a package perspective and really trying to meet the traveler where they are. And I think that I got some time back. Thank you very much. I hope that was insightful for you. And like I said, I'll put this QR code up here. You can click here. I think that we have about 50 to 60 markets globally and quite a few in the Asia Pacific region. So you can download and you'll have some information about your market specifically. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Katie.
Absolutely.